Radio Legends. I'm your host, Perry Williams. And today we're going to feature one of what I consider one of Chicago radio legends, Richard Steele. Richard and I have a little history. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to do a brief bio. Of course, Richard is a Chicago native, a graduate of Hirsch High School. We don't have to put the year in, but he's a graduate of Hirsch High School.
I don't care.
Okay, 1960, class of 1960. His professional radio journey began in 67 at WHIB, followed by his first full-time role as PD and on-air personality at TOY in Roanoke, Virginia. He also has had stints with WAAF and WILD in Boston, then a return to Chicago at GRT, as we earlier talked about. He was a program director at WJPC, later becoming a key voice at WVON, WBMX, WBEZ. And what I think is really classic about Richard's career, he's done work in public radio, news talk radio, and WBEZ, hosting the acclaimed Page 2 talk show and Talk of the City, where he interviewed cultural icons such as Gwendolyn Brooks, William Safire, Wynton Marsalis, and we can't forget about the 80s and 90s. This is when I came on the scene. He became a familiar voice on Morning Connection on WVAZ and later roles at WGCI FM and AM on the Spirit Express. And once again, we can't leave out his television work. We talked about Urban Street, which he worked with the late Ty Wansley, also Chicago Today, The Discovery, Showcase, and WTTW's Art Beat Chicago. And we also mentioned you did the pledge for public TV, the pledge night. Man, Richard, you've been pretty busy in your career.
Yeah, trying to remain employed. Yeah, got a tough road. Yeah, but a good road.
Well, I wanted to bring this up, and this is the personal part. You were one of the first people to see me when I first started. I believe it was 1989 at WVAZ. I was hired to be, I don't know what I was hired to be, honestly. Deborah Scott was the news director, and I guess I can talk about it now. She brought me from Cleveland. I worked in Cleveland, Ohio with the late Steve Harris as my program director. And I was going to be the news anchor. I didn't know they had a news anchor already. I was surprised to see John Davis sitting in the chair. But so what they did, they decided to make me the news writer. So I wrote for John, and being honest, I could not write. I didn't learn how to write news until probably 10 years later.
Which is interesting because John Davis was a well-established television news reporter.
Yeah, and he didn't need a writer.
No, he was at Channel 2, as a matter of fact.
Yes, exactly. So I met you. You were teamed up with Daryl Daniel in the mornings. And I guess the funny story was the night before, which was Sunday night, I was out partying. I lost my voice.
Oh, wow.
So the first day of work, they're introducing me, and I can't even talk. It's like, when did we get a bag of bad goods here? This guy can't even talk. So
unbelievable.
but that's the one thing I've been taking care of this moneymaker ever since. So
I hear you. I get it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little shop, because you were. I remember a discussion we had. You said that you actually were not in the industry long enough to be with the good guys, but at the same time, you weren't any of the young guys either. So just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my thing was transitional, kind of, because the good guys were in the 60s, mid 60s. And those guys, generally speaking, were a little older than me, closer to my age. But when I got into radio, when I came back to Chicago in 1970 at WGRT, WVON was kind of almost at the end of their run. But because I was very visible, people today still tell me, "You were one of the good guys." No, I wasn't.
Oh, wow.
I did later work at WVON twice, but not with the original crew of Joe Cobb and Bill Butterball Crane and all those guys. I didn't work with those guys. Herb Kent and I did work together on several occasions, as because he worked at several stations too. But in terms of the original good guys, not really. But from an age standpoint in radio, I'm sort of a holdover. I was part of the older group from the WVON days, and then when the newer group of people came in, I'm older than Doug Banks and Tom Joyner and all those people, So when later on, when hip hop and rap became a really big thing, my time was kind of closing out, and so transitionally, when I went into talk radio and doing jazz on the radio, the timing was absolutely wonderful. And I can tell you this: I looked up this. I have this contract from Marv Dyson.
Oh, boy.
who
Another
tried,
contract story.
yeah, well, he tried to hire me back. I had been at public radio at WBEZ for a couple of years, and I guess this was a transitional period for WVAZ, because I'm looking at this paperwork. It was he sent me a contract and offered me a job to come back to V103, letter of agreement, clear channel communications, employment agreement, and it says this would sign me off for services beginning April 1st, 2001, and end March 31, 2004. So it was a 3-year contract to come back to music radio, and the money was much more than I was making at public radio at WBEZ. But my thinking was, by the time the 3 years is up, I'll even be older and really and not suitable for that kind of radio at that point. And so the money that I got would be immediate. It would be 3 years, but what happens after 3 years if I intended to stay in the business? So I respectfully declined. He sent me a note, which I'll read. It says, "Can you need to get back to me in 24 hours so I can make a decision about what to do, or have to move on." He put his cell number in there. I still got that contract, a copy of that contract.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, don't get me wrong when I said not another contract story, because just the other night I was interviewing Rick Party, and he said that he had a contract encounter with Marv where I believe it was one of the other stations. I don't know if it was B96 offered him a deal, and it was the same amount, but he tricked Marv and said that the contract was 20 or 30,000 more, and he kind of finagled the paperwork and got a raise. I guess you can talk about that now that you don't work in the industry or work with Marv. But that was interesting.
Well, somebody told me, I don't know how true this is. I know you talked to Crazy Howard McGee about a week or so ago or more.
I
was told at some point that there was a radio station that was about to come into Chicago that would challenge GCI at that point, and Howard was hot, and his numbers were right at the top of the list. So the deal, I think his contract was up, or they renegotiated his contract because the word was out that whatever this new station was going to try to get Howard to come over because his numbers were so good. And then somebody told me, no, the fact that they were going to try to get him, nah, Howard put that word out himself, so he can.
Oh, wow! I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know how true that is, but it was a good move if he did that. You know what I mean? Because the radio station business itself, I mean, it's about business and about the ratings and about numbers. And so, if you're going to be, I mean, they're not going to have any sympathy for you when your time is up or the numbers are down. So if he did that, more power to him. You know what I mean? And I mean, you have to play your own game, and I got that. So
it's either you or them. I mean,
absolutely.
That's how that works.
Well,
I want to say this. I really appreciate the like the archive information and videos and things of that sort that you sent me of you. I guess one was you were doing a car commercial.
Oh
Um,
yeah, oh yeah. For
but
the
but I'm doing my research because I'm a journalist anyway, and
right.
I was looking at a video, a WVON video, and I think you were on the mic and you were kind of dancing around.
Oh yeah, back in the old
and
days, right?
and I didn't know that Mary D was on VON.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know.
She was in that commercial.
No. That wasn't her. That was not Mary D. No, that was Avis Lavelle. Remember Avis Lavelle?
Oh, Mayor Daley's press secretary.
Exactly, because
I understand now.
Avis
Okay.
Lavelle was in radio for a long time, and then she actually, I think, worked at WGN before she got into politics. But at that point, Avis was doing news. We're talking about a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because that's an old commercial. But Avis was doing news, and so she was in the studio when they cut that commercial with me, and they were also talking about, it was a commercial that was sort of saluting Operation Push at that point.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me this is what's intriguing me. You've worked with a lot of different types of mediums. And is there a favorite of yours out of all that you've covered? Because you've done just about everything.
Well, I've had so many great experiences. It's really hard to say. I mean, when I was doing music radio, when I was doing overnight talk radio at VON at one point, one of the several times I worked at, VON, there was a VON time. There was a time when VON was owned by they. How can I explain this? That's a WVAZ 107. 95. What am I? There's so many stations I forget. V103. When VON was bought at one point, the same company that owned, I think that owned V103 owned VON for a while, and they changed the because I think you did news during that period when I was doing overnight talk.
Possibly. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Well, to make a long story short, a lot of the people that I talked to when I was doing talk radio, I mean, I had a chance to interview Minister Louis Farrakhan, and then at another point, the radio station when I was working for Dusty Radio 1390. I remember one time when Howard was on, I think he was on afternoons or something, but he was really big time. It might have been mornings. I'm not sure. It might have been mornings. In any case, Hillary Clinton was the first lady, and she was in town for some event, and the station got her to agree to an interview, and she wanted to weigh in on this idea. I don't know if you remember the story of Girl X, the 9-year-old in the projects who was raped and sodomized and beat up and almost killed. Well, because the radio station got behind that story, I pushed them on that, and they started a fund and gave the family some money and all of that. So when Hillary was in town, they set up a situation where she agreed to talk to the radio station, to be interviewed about what her thoughts were. So I was on the AM at that point, but they said to me, "We want you to come over and do the interview." During Howard's time on the air, and they told Howard, "You run the board. This is on the FM, but don't say anything." Because Howard was like a fun guy, saying a lot of stuff that was, kind of fun and silly.
Yeah,
and so
that wasn't his lane. That's for sure.
Right. They didn't want that to happen while the first lady was doing a radio interview. So they had me come over to the FM, and Howard just run the board when I did the interview with her. So I had a chance to talk to so many interesting people on both ends, music, radio, and in talk radio. I got a chance to talk to Quincy Jones when I was doing BEZ, and I got a chance to at BEZ. I talked to David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks when they had left the Temptations, and they were
Wow.
working
Wow.
as a duo. And I did, I was MC for a bunch of those Chicago jazz festivals in the park, the big jazz festivals that went out to about, I don't know, 100 stations on across the country. So I did that. Let me tell you about one thing that I really want to get in, because it was one of the most memorable things I've done.
Oh yeah, let's hear that.
Two things really. It was the Million Man March that the station sent me to. That the thing in Washington D.C.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Sponsored.
I remember that you were designated to go. Yeah.
Exactly. But that was incredible. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. That was amazing. And I made phone calls back to the station. The other thing was, while I was at BEZ, we had this segment we did where they said, we'd like to hear from people who had unusual professions. So one guy submitted that he taught people how to fly airplanes, a jet. So he had a jet trainer plane that he had at this airfield, and he would teach people how to fly if they could afford the fee. So we called him, my producer called him, and he said, yeah, he called us to say he was one of the people that had an unusual profession. So I said, okay, we'll be out to interview you. So we went out one day, we set it up, we went out there, we had a conversation. I put the flight suit on, and it was a two-seater, me in the front and him in the back. And we went up in the jet, and he let me at the controls for a few minutes.
Oh wow, wow!
which was amazing, man. But absolutely incredible.
That doesn't happen every day.
Nah, that was man, what a thrill that was. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I got a chance to do some really amazing things, man, on both ends, and I'm grateful for that. Experiences that a lot of people probably would never get to do.
Let me ask this. This is real personal. Have your kids been able to not so much understand what you do, but have they been able to participate in some of the work that you've done? Or even attended some of the events that you may have hosted? Or
yeah, they were never, I mean, they recognized what I did for a living, but they were never carried away about that, which I'm glad about. I mean, I remember taking my daughter to see Prince at the Chicago Theater, and we had these incredible seats, and that was a big thrill. Also, the Janet Jackson tour, where it was, I can't remember, it was like her biggest record at that point.
Probably Rhythm Nation album when it came out.
Exactly. And man, what a thrill that was, because I wanted to go, actually. You know what I mean? So. So they, there've been a few things that they were able to that they wanted to participate in, that I took them to, but they really weren't. I mean, they weren't really, big on, my dad is Richard Steele on the radio. They just, because my wife was never like that. My wife had her own identity. You know what I mean? And so she was always very supportive. But when I met my wife, she was not a groupie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She didn't know who was on the radio.
Same. My wife is the same. I mean, she could care less as long as I worked and made the money.
Absolutely. Right.
You still working?
Matter. Yeah, it didn't matter. None of that stuff mattered.
Yeah.
So it's the one thing I will say about that whole thing is what you hear a lot of people say who have shared shared the public spotlight with their family, and people that like what they do. There are times when I wish I'd spent more time with them, because I was always making an appearance, and I was always going somewhere and doing some things connected to my job, and not that I didn't enjoy it, you know what I mean. But when I look back on it, I spent a lot of time doing stuff like that, you know what I mean. And thinking back, we didn't take a lot of family vacations. You know what I mean? My wife went with me a couple of times when we were doing remote broadcasts from places that the station was doing a promotion. We went to a lot of different places that she didn't go to all of those. When we did broadcasts in Cancun, she went there, and when we went to Rio de Janeiro, she didn't go to that one, but her sister went. keep an eye on me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
I don't
you
know.
know,
I think that's the trip I didn't go on because I think I went 2 out of the 3 times that they went.
well, and by the way, about that, we were the first radio station to do that. The first time that we went to Rio de Janeiro, the guy who set that up, we were the test station, and so it was the first time around when we went, and then after that, different radio stations went around the country, including the time when Doug Banks and those guys went. But we were the very when I was doing mornings, and it was Daryl Daniel. I think it was Daryl. Yeah,
Is
Daryl
that
was,
when you went?
yeah.
Oh, wow. That definitely predated Doug.
Oh, absolutely. I'm telling you, we were the first. We were the experiment.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, another thing that I really respect you about, not just your stellar career, but you have a lot of mentees in the business. Many that I've come across. Al Greer speaks well of you, and Ramonski Love. I mean, people that are actually in the industry and have been in the industry. You definitely have a track record of giving great advice and instruction and things of that sort. And I don't see that changing because you just told me you talked to Ramonski the other day. So
Oh
I'm
yes, ski is my guy. Ski is my
yeah,
guy. Yeah, no question about it. You know what I mean? So, because I think and let me tell you something else about the friendships and relationships in Chicago with people in the business of radio and records and music. There's a kinship here in Chicago. Now, I wasn't in the business when I used to live in New York because I lived actually I actually was born in Brooklyn and spent time in Brooklyn. When I got out of the military, I went to radio school in Brooklyn before I got that job in Virginia. Um, so I just observed a lot of radio and what radio stations did and who the people were and the kind of uh, relationships that we have in Chicago after I got into business and did get to know people who worked in New York radio. It's not to say here in Chicago, we competed against each other, but we remained friends. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Now, there was a guy that came here one time. He's still alive, but I'll speak on it. He was the program director at WBMX for a minute. His name was Ernest James.
I heard of him.
I worked for Ernest for a period of time. But Ernest had a thing. Of course, he was not from Chicago, and he had a thing that he resented the fact that some of the guys who worked at different radio stations would get together with guys that worked at his radio station at BMX, and because he didn't think you should be socializing and
Or
hanging out and
fraternizing. Yeah,
fraternizing and hanging out together, and he didn't understand the whole psyche of the Chicago thing about radio, and entertainment, because we all hung out together. We
yeah.
competed. We had, we tried to win in our respective slots on the radio and all of that. But in terms of the social aspect of it and hanging out, we all hung out together. So
Yeah, it's different when that on-air light goes on. I mean, it's
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
But in New York, the mentality is different in terms of what people, how people are in radio. Talking to people that I knew in radio after I got into the business and actually met a few people and how things work and the competitive aspect of it. That's cool, but they weren't really cool with each other, like that. So Chicago is a great place to do media, to do radio and television, if you're Black.
yeah. When you mentioned that, it made me think about what was that a couple years ago when Elroy Smith, former program director of GCI, had an event and brought out all the GCI people and people I hadn't seen in years.
I was there.
Yeah, I know you were, and it was like this is a reunion, and it's good to have those things every now and then because you never know. You never know. I didn't know that would be the last time I saw Miss V, Velma, but I was glad I had a chance to see her. I hadn't seen her in years.
And by the
you know.
way, for those who I'm sure don't know, Velma Brazelton was a woman who was in the, she was secretary always to the top level management, and she was a very warm human being and always concerned about you as a person. I've never met anybody who was consistently like that all the time, even in her position, because she was always right up there, near the top of all of the decisions, and worked for all the people that were the big time movers and shakers. But
Mhm.
she always had empathy and concern for the employees, always.
And she was the buffer for most of the time, too.
Yeah, that
You
too.
know, for
Yeah.
the hard decisions, she kind of gave it a nice little soft spin to it. I remember, um, I didn't know this was happening, but they were bringing Steve Harvey in to do mornings because Doug had already left. He went to do syndication, and I guess they moved Tom to the mornings, but he was in Dallas doing mornings. But what was going to transpire was, of course, Elroy mentioned to me, he says, Steve wants a female to be his news anchor. And that turned out to be Val Landon. And prior to that, maybe a month prior to that, Velma approached me and said, Perry, have you ever thought about doing the Quiet Storm? So she was really trying to save my job.
Right.
Giving me an option,
Yeah. You might
And
want to
I told her, I said, well, Velma, that sounds good, but I'm a news guy.
Yeah.
I'll be a fish out of water doing that. Not that I would do bad, but I know it focuses on ratings and all this and that, and I'm just starting, and I didn't want to be a flop, so I'm gonna stay with my strength. And it turned out very well because I guess they made a deal with Shadow Traffic. Shadow was creating a new news department, and in about 5 years, I became the news director. So that worked out very well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I love kicking and screaming, but
yeah. Let me tell you a story about Steve Harvey. You mentioned Steve. There've been a lot of things said about Steve Harvey since he really blew up and became as big as he is, and I don't know if they're true or not about how he is or not communicating with, not being open to talking to people anymore, and blah 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 and all of that. But I can tell you this: when he was working at WGCI in the mornings, right?
Oh, you mean his live show?
Yeah, his
not
live
the syndication. Okay,
right,
yeah.
his live show. I was on Dusty Radio 1390 in the morning with Emily McKendall, my one of the best people I ever worked with in radio, and we were just down the hall.
Yeah, I remember that.
So what he would do was when the news break would when they get a news break at his end, he'd come down to our end and he'd inject a little comedy and we'd laugh it up and that. and then he would go back, to GCI down
so
the
that
hall.
was his break.
Yeah, that was his break. Come down and sit with, which we thought was great. It was fantastic. At some point, Elroy did not like that and decided to cut that out and asked him to stop doing that. We were very disappointed about that, So, but it is what it is. I understand management makes decisions about things to do, and they do it based on what they think are the best directions to go in. It's kind of like, Steve Harvey did something else that I think is notable when Elroy was also our program director, and he gave Emily and I instructions to not be as chatty as we were, which is normal for radio program directors. But we had a real relationship. And we talk about issues and play the music and talk about issues and all kinds of stuff like that. And we had good ratings for an AM station at that point, and I think it was working. But Elroy gave us a rule about you got to stop that. Steve Harvey went into because Steve Harvey came down one time and we said, Steve, we can't do it anymore. This is before Elroy told him to stop. I said, we can't do it anymore because Elroy said we have to cut down on our chatter, and we can't do it with you, and blah blah blah. Steve went into Elroy and told them that, listen, that's what they do. That's what makes them popular. People like them as a couple on the radio, So he stuck up for us.
Oh,
It
good.
didn't change Elroy's decision, but he did go in, because we couldn't really go in and, we would have lost that. We would have lost that battle for sure. But I give it to Steve. He did go in and stand up for us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a story similar. This was on Banks and Company. I believe Civil Wilkes was the traffic person, JJ was sports, and I did news. So we that news block, that's what we both handled. And we were actually in the studio with Doug, and it was hard not to laugh.
Right.
Because the guy was hilarious.
Yes, he was.
And at that time, James Alexander was the program director.
Oh, yeah.
And he moved us out of that studio and put us in another studio. A side studio, one of the production studio, I think it was next to the ones that you and Emily worked out of.
Right.
And when we got word that James got a new job, we made a beeline back to the studio, man. It was funny.
Yeah, he was kind of humorless.
Yeah. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
But that everybody's got their own way of managing, I guess. So that's how that went.
Well, I had so many experiences in radio with people that I worked for and worked with, and in the overall, I really had good experiences over the years, and so I look at that as one of the reasons I was able to be around so long, because I got along with people. I mean, I didn't have to kiss anybody's butt or anything. I was always being me, and understood what the management thing was all about. I had been a program director several times, as a matter of fact, so I understood that part of it, and it worked for me.
Now, this is something that I have to ask you. I know the criteria for getting into business for me was, they laid it out. They say you need to go to a small market, then work in a medium market, and then Chicago. And fortunately, that worked out for me. But I'm looking at your work. How did you get to Boston? And you were born in Chicago. How did that happen?
Well, here's the deal. I was in the Air Force from 60 to, by the way, back in high school at Hirsch High School, when I graduated in 1960, I'm one of the few people who put, you put next to your name what you want to be when you grow up. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of the few people who put radio disc jockey. I have no idea why exactly. Most people never turn out to be the thing they put next to their name when you graduate, right? In any case, I went in the Air Force from 60 to 64. When I got out in 64, I went to live in Brooklyn, and I went to radio school. And so I went to 2 different radio schools. And then I got a job. I thought I had a job in Atlanta. I used to send all these tapes out as a guy new trying to get into business. And then one time I got a letter back saying that I was going to be hired, and I was thrilled. Perry, I said, "Oh, this is it," And then they said, "It's a couple of months away. We're starting a new black station. Blah blah blah. We want new talent." So then, when the time came, they didn't call me, so I kept calling the station, and the guy kept ducking me. And then they finally said, "Well, we decided to go in another direction." Right? So that was out. So no, I'm devastated. And then about a year after that, I kept sending out tapes. And I got a response from a station in Roanoke, Virginia, that was brand new station. The town had never had a black radio station, black music station. It was white owned, mm-hmm. And they would take on a newcomer. They liked my tape and my voice and all of that, and they were paying a grand total of $80 a week. I got a salary of $128 every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So, but listen. I was thrilled to be on the radio. If they paid nothing, I would have been there, right? So
yeah, that's the industry. I mean, that's for people that love the industry.
Loved it. So I stayed there about a year, maybe a little over a year. And then one of the guys that I went to radio school with in New York got a job before I did and had become program director in Boston at WILD. And by the way, Elroy worked there many years
I
later.
remember.
Yeah. So anyway, he called me and he said, "Listen, man, we got an opening. Would you want to leave Roanoke?" I said, "As fast as I can." So I got a job doing mornings in Boston at WILD, and then when I was there about a year, I got a call from the general manager of the station in Boston. I mean, in Virginia. He said, "Listen, the agency that reps us here also reps the station in Chicago, and they're looking for somebody. And I thought about you because that's your home. Would you be interested?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" So he told me who to send the tape to in Chicago and all of that, and I did. And they got it. They liked it, and they said, "Well, listen, can you come in here on a Sunday and we interview you?" I said, "Yeah." So I flew in from Boston on a Sunday on my own dime, and they had about 4 people that interviewed me in the office on a Sunday afternoon. Now,
Wow.
mind you, if they had not hired me, I wouldn't get reimbursed for the flight, but they did hire me, and I got reimbursed for the flight. They said, "Well, can you be back here in a week?" And so I only gave the station a week's notice in Boston. That was 1970, and so from 1970 to when I kind of unofficially retired in 2017, I've been here ever since, Perry. I mean, I'm just amazed at the things that have happened for me over these years.
That's,
Incredible.
it's great. I mean, just to watch you, um, like I say, my first day working with you, I believe that was in '89 when I came to the Chicago market, and then a short time after that, working directly with you and Emily.
My girl, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like this is the same Richard Steele I work with, and it taught me that don't ever burn bridges in this market or this industry because you never know who you're going to end up working with. You never know. You
You
never
never
know.
you never know, man. You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. I've connected with a lot of people over the years, and it's been all good. I mean, I had a few instances from time to time where personalities just don't click. And in the overall, let me say this about radio, and I think I said this to you privately. When I look at Doug Banks and Tom Joyner and some of the others who did what they did, and I respect their talent and ability, but I always viewed myself more as a communicator rather than an entertainer, or a little bit of an entertainer
Hmm.
and a lot of communicator skills. You know what I mean? So um, I used to tell my wife about how much money they made, and how I didn't make quite that much money, and she would say, "Listen, you lasted longer than anybody in
Yeah.
the business, and you made a really decent amount of money. So what's to complain about?" And as she pointed out, the larger majority of people who have jobs, and I don't know what the percentages are, but a very large number of people who have jobs have them because they have to make a living and pay the bills and put their kids in school. If they had a choice of something they really wanted to do,
Hmm.
they would do something else. I had a choice of something I loved to do and did it for most of my working life. How good can it get, you know?
And you're a rarity. I mean, most on-air personalities, communicators, I'll use that term better because that's what you do. They don't last that long in industry. I mean, it's rare to last what 30, 40 decades. I mean that's unheard of.
Well, as based on that tape that I sent you, I mean that air check list, that and you looked at all those names, because some of them I had to make myself remember who they were. You might explain to people what that is. I sent Perry a list. I mean
Yeah.
an air check uh, that had there's an air check. Uh, I guess they must have had, I don't know how many 100 stations on there. They had different eras and different types of stations. And when it got down to black radio, they had all the people that worked at all the black stations here in Chicago over the years. And when you look down that list, most people you would at some point depending on your age, you might remember some of those people, but there's so many that you wouldn't remember because you don't know they were here, but then they were gone. The guy that replaced me when they canned me at V103, John Mons was
Mhm.
the. I think he lasted the length of his contract. He might have been 2 years or whatever, but he's the name you never heard anymore about, or the other people
I
that
think
came.
they move him to afternoons,
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, yeah,
and he probably lasts a little longer on afternoons
yeah.
because I think they teamed him up with Bonnie DeShong and
I think
George
you're right.
Wilborn. Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're right. And they were, look, talented guy. I mean, it was some talented people that came through here, but that's what they did. They came through here, you know,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm not knocking that because that's part of the business. Part of the business is there was a guy one time. I'll tell you this, Perry, and I'll never forget. I was with some guys. We were talking about radio one time. We were in a social setting somewhere and laughing about some of our trials and tribulations in radio, and somebody brought up about they said about this guy who they heard had inflatable furniture because he moved around so
Oh
much
my
that
God.
that every time he went to another station,
Oh my
and
God.
the guy, and I think that this particular guy worked at BMX, and it was about 10 of us, I guess, um, at some kind of a record thing, and the guy said that was me. And the
So
guy
he confessed.
he was the guy, it was in that little set. And we said, oh man, we nothing personal, man. You know what I mean? But it was so funny, man. Inflatable furniture, man. So that
But that was a real thing for him.
right, because you got to move, you get another job. Uh, and back in the day, for us, when the stations were really popping, and that can only happen. You got to consider that everybody who gets in radio, for the most part, white and black, the ideal is to work back then in Chicago, New York, or L.A. Atlanta wasn't even that big at that point back in the 70s for
Mhm,
radio,
mhm.
but it was Chicago, New York, and L.A. So if you get to do that, that's like, man, that's like the end of the rainbow, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah. What?
the chances of that happening when you start at a small station like I did in Roanoke, Virginia, the chances of that happening, that you end up back, like I end up back in Chicago, or somebody ends up in New York, or in L.A., are slim. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a very small window for that.
I
So
definitely know. I started in Fort Wayne, Indiana at WOWO. And, Rick Party and I, we actually went to the same broadcast school, and he was working on the East Coast. And he said, Perry, I could hear you on the air because it was a 50,000 water,
right,
you know.
exactly. Oh
But
man,
I could not map out my career. In other words, it wasn't me that directed me going from Fort Wayne, Cleveland, then Chicago. I just went the route that they told me to go, and was fortunately brought in by Deborah Scott. Now here's something that's really interesting. I've never shared this on mic, but when I was let go by the station in Fort Wayne, I came back to Chicago and I was looking for work, and I was sending out air checks. And I believe the news director in Cleveland listened to my air check and hired me sight unseen.
wow.
I had never heard of that before. I've never experienced that again. Never heard anybody else say that before. It's like I didn't even have a sit down. And this was the time where people were getting interviewed.
Wow, wow.
But I guess the news director was just that impressed. So yeah, that's one of those stories I can tell my grandchildren. So just interesting, this whole industry.
Well, let me tell you what happened to me when I became program director at JPC in 1978. I mean, I'm sorry, when Johnson bought it. I came in 1970. It was WGRT. Johnson bought it in 73, and
Mm-hmm.
at that point, there was Johnson had a radio consultant named Jerry Bolding, and Bolding had recommended a guy to replace the program director at that point after he bought the station. So they had agreed on this guy. Johnson had signed the guy on to a contract, never met him. So the guy came into Chicago and went to Johnson Publishing Company, and the guy Johnson met him. I can't remember the guy's name. I can't remember his. I think his first name was Donnie. I think, but anyway, he came in and he had a. I didn't meet him, but they told me about him when he came to the building. He had a jerry curl and he had a white suit on like he was going to a disco, and Johnson was not impressed after he had signed this guy. So Johnson determined, no, I don't think I want to hire that guy, but they had to pay him anyway. So they paid him over a period of time, paid out this contract that they had signed. And then the suggestion was, well, Richard Steele is already here and he's already at the radio station. And people in Chicago know him. So why don't you make him program director? And so in 73, that's when I became program director under John Johnson when he bought the station. And I remained program director for the next 5 years till 78, till I got canned. But my becoming program director was purely because Johnson didn't like the look of this guy when the guy came in for the job. Didn't look what Johnson thought was the part. So
well, that was the altar of hiring sight unseen.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Was. So that's, those are radio stories that are true. That's what happens in the business,
Well, one of the things I would like you to kind of explain, because I know you've experienced this, but unfortunately, people that are young people now, they don't know anything about radio wars because there's a monopoly right now in most cases. iHeart owns everything. But back then, there was competition between... There was always been competition, but what I remember most was BMX and GCI.
Yeah.
Or then you, of course, V103 and GCI.
Absolutely.
Could you kind of explain a little bit about, because you were actually in the midst of it?
Yeah. Well, when Barry Mayo had been here before, he came. He's the one who brought the guy with the pig hat.
Bob Wall?
Bob Wall. He brought Bob Wall here, which I never did understand, but people loved Bob Wall. But that was his first go around. When he came back and was part of this media company that bought WBMX and turned it to V103, it became a straight up competition especially for an older demographic. But V103 was really hot at that point and hit the market right at the right point in time. And, GCI was appealing to a younger market, but V103 kind of got both markets at that point.
Yeah.
And so the competition was like incredibly fierce. And I don't know if you recall this, but when V103 came into existence, the best variety of hits and dusties, Herb Kent's people were talking about a lawsuit about the use of the word dusties. I don't know if you recall that situation.
I remember that. Vaguely, but I do remember it.
And then they went back and forth because Herb had never, he didn't own like the phrase itself, but he had established dusties. I mean, he's the one who came up with the term, with the phrase for the music that was played in that idiom. So they went back and forth, and at some point, I don't think they ever paid him or paid anybody, but they did come to an agreement about the usage and it not continuing to be a legal case. But there was so much attention paid to V103 when it came into existence because the music was so hot at that point. Like Marvin Gaye, like a lot of the R&B music at that point were like smoking. Really at that point, So even though the younger audience was on the GCI end, the V103 audience was large and very, very active, in terms of coming out to events and supporting the radio station, entering, being involved in contests and they did really sufficient advertising. They had a lot of billboards and a lot of stuff that was going on that contributed to their success, and it was an all-out war. Which at some point, obviously, as V103 stayed around longer, it became older and the audience became older. And then, you know, it kind of got played out at a point later on. But one of the reasons I got hired when they started was because I was in that age bracket. I was a little more than that age bracket, but I had been around for a long time, and I had some recognition. People knew who I was, and
Yeah.
they wanted to get at least one person who people knew, as opposed to starting a new radio station and bringing everybody in from out of town. You know, so I got very, very lucky. I really did. The timing was significant, even though I didn't plan it. It planned me.
Hmm.
You know? So
Well, let's
yeah.
talk about your teammates. I know that you were teamed with Emily. That probably was the best connection ever, because you guys were definitely fluid on air. Sasha Dalton,
Yes.
Daryl Daniel, who? Oh, Pam Morris.
Pam
I mean,
Morris, yeah.
you worked with a lot of co-hosts,
Yeah, I did.
and now this is what I was going to ask. When how long did the Daryl Daniel, Richard Steele experiment go, and did you ever get another person to work with you on V103?
No, I didn't, and that's unfortunate because I really think, and I've said this to you privately, I think that not to knock Daryl Daniel, because she is what she is. Because I think she's still around doing. I think she does gospel radio in Indiana, one of the suburbs. But she came from Memphis, and one of the people, whoever was program director at that point, and I can't remember who made that decision because they looked around for somebody to pair me with, and somebody really liked her performance in Memphis, and they contacted her and brought her in, and we kind of pulled it off on the air, but we never did really have that kind of situation. I'll say this: had it been me and Emily McKendall in V103 and as the V103 morning team, we would have lasted a lot longer and gotten even bigger ratings than we did, because she and I became, like, in my opinion, the perfect male-female morning hosts. You know,
I agree.
we just connected. I mean, you know, it was my girl. You know, we were friends on the air and off the air. And as a matter of fact, we're still friends. She talks to my wife about twice, 2-3 times a month.
Oh, wow.
You know, because she doesn't live in Chicago anymore. She lives in Florida. But
Okay.
And then the second best that I had was Sasha Dalton, because we had been friends a long time. And when I was doing gospel radio, 1390, Sasha is the one who she literally invented the Gospel Fest for Chicago.
That's what I know. That's what I know. I looked that up, and I'm like, there she is. Her name's right there.
Yeah. So, and then she and I had a great personal relationship. So when she and I were on doing morning, I think we were doing mornings on Gospel Radio 1390. I had a wonderful time with her, you know, and so the things that, and I knew some people in the gospel, because, you know, Chicago's like, you know, if you're on the radio and you're involved with the community, you know, people in the religious community as well as the music community, other music community.
Yeah.
And so, but she knew everybody. I mean, she was connected to every church, every minister. and so having her with me on the radio was just an amazing thing. Pam Morris and I, we were okay, but we weren't as fluid as Sasha and I were.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I have just been incredibly lucky. And then at another point when we weren't on the radio together, but Jackie Hasselrig was the program director of the AM for a while, and Jackie, she was also a producer for when I was doing a talk show. She was a producer. She hooked up an interview for me with Johnny Mathis.
She told me about that. I talked to her about a month ago. She mentioned that.
It was incredible. I mean, he agreed to do this. And when he came to the phone, he said, he said, I'm on the golf course, but I agreed to do this. So I stepped away and I'm doing this interview. And that was amazing to me. I don't have a copy of that. I wish I had, but got a chance to talk to Johnny Mathis. And also between Jackie Hasselrig and Richard Pegee, they hooked me up with Lena Horne, and we did a great interview with her, which I still have a copy of. So
Wait a minute. Because I want to make sure I'm right on this one. She mentioned that she also, I guess there was a little difficulty getting Oprah.
yeah, when I interviewed Oprah when Oprah first got here, but Jackie was not at that point. This was an earlier point before Jackie. As a matter of fact, I had Marv Dyson had connected with the Oprah people, and he set it up so that Oprah would. The interesting story, so that Oprah would come and be interviewed when I was doing an overnight thing at what was then VON, owned by Clear Channel. It's a real confused ownership thing at that point. But I was doing an overnight talk show, and overnight talk where I played some jazz and also did a lot of interviews and took phone calls about politics and all of that. So Marv had set up with this new person in town that everybody was talking about, Oprah Winfrey. So the night we were supposed to do it, she didn't show up. We had promoted that Oprah Winfrey was going to be on. And blah, blah, blah.
She did a no-show.
And she did a no-show. So then Marv told me that something had happened, and but she wanted to come back. Well, she wanted to come back and make up for that. I said, yeah, okay, cool, you know. And of course, Oprah she was big in Chicago at that point because she was new and everybody was talking about Oprah and who was Oprah. And then, but so she certainly was big at that point, but not to the degree that it grew into later on. So anyway, the next night or 2 nights later, when we said again, well, Oprah's supposed to be here again, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. So at the time she was supposed to arrive, and I was on from like 11 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning when Wilton Brunson came on doing gospel. So when it was 11 o'clock and then it was 11:30, I said, well, here we go again. I said, Oprah was supposed to show. And then at that point, we had the studio door open because it was at night. Nobody was in the station. And I heard Oprah down the hall, wait, I'm here. Because the could hear the speaker when she was coming through the front door. I'm here. So she was running down the hall and she came into the studio and she stayed about an hour and we took live phone calls and she was a lot of fun to talk to. I still have that tape. So that was
good.
Yeah, that was that was a lot of fun, you know. So I had opportunities like that. I mean, come on, man, Oprah, you know. So back in the day, so I had a lot of experiences, man.
You know that, and I can say this: the industry has definitely changed. But what I get a chance to do on this program or format is reminisce and at the same time educate, because when I'm reminiscing and you got people that are watching the streaming program, they're commenting. I haven't seen too many comments tonight, but they will on the YouTube channel, and they'll start reminiscing with you, and they'll remember when that song was played, or they'll remember when this incident that we're talking about took place, or they'll even say, I didn't know that happened. Of course you don't, it's behind the scenes, you know. So I just love that. I love that. And I can look back and say, I'm glad I experienced that, because it's not going to happen again.
Oh, absolutely not. Listen, one more thing. I had Harold Washington on as a regular guest when I was doing the overnight talk show. Harold Washington used to, when he was mayor, they'd have a monthly thing at I think at GCI, where there'd be a round table on a Saturday, where a bunch of reporters from TV and radio, black, would come in, and he'd answer questions in a round table discussion. Well, Marv set up a thing where I would be able to interview Harold by myself.
Wow.
Once,
one-on-one.
One-on-one. I think we did it like once every couple of weeks, but it was called a chat with the chief. And so Harold would come in with his security, and this is funny, man. He would say, and my producer I told him, I said, I said, Mayor Washington, we got a producer who interact with the phone callers, and so she'll screen the callers, and so you don't have to worry about somebody, for the most part, going off and saying some dumb shit. So, so he said, listen, let them through whatever they want. I can handle it. I said, wow, he said it doesn't matter. Whatever they bring, I got you. I said, wow, man, what a guy, an amazing guy, amazing. So
And he handled it too, right?
yeah, he did. Yeah, it was a real thrill. It really was a thrill to have him to come in and sit with me and take phone calls and talk about about whatever the latest political situation was that was happening with him. He was never afraid to answer questions. He was open to everything, and he was not shy. So yeah.
Wow, that's great news. That's great
Yeah.
to have that insight and have that experience of talking one-on-one. Not too many people can say that. And this is something I say to some of the young people I work with at iHeart. Not everybody can sit in these chairs.
Oh, absolutely. You're no question about it. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you occupy it, you really got to be very representative, because you never know how many opportunities you have with it, that type of thing. I really wholeheartedly believe that. I remember, and I'll probably have him on later, Kenny McReynolds.
Oh yeah.
When I was listening to him on BMX back in the day, and it just dawned on me, he's the only one that does sports for them. He's the only one that sits in that chair. So it's like, I can imagine there's so many people that would love to be in that seat, but they're not in that seat. And I just love what he's done with his career. He's getting all type of accolades and awards, and he's doing TV more now than he started out in radio. Now he's doing coverage of sports games, and yeah, I'm really proud of him.
Well deserved. I've watched his career from the very beginning, and so he's come such a long way, and he has really, become an entity in the sports world in radio and television. So my hat's off to Kenny McReynolds. I haven't talked to him in a number of years, but he's another one of the guys that I've known over the years that I've seen grow and become the guy that he is today in terms of his profession. Fantastic. If you talk to him, tell him I said hello.
I certainly will. I certainly will. Richard, I just want to make this statement. I know you've described yourself as a communicator, but one thing that I noticed about you is that you are quick-witted. I mean, I guess you have to be if you're in the mornings,
Yeah.
And you see things happen, and you're trying to be trendy with what's happening, and you have an opinion, and then of course that opinion turns into something else and becomes entertaining. And yeah, I've appreciated that about you. And of course, you definitely had the right type of co-host that you can bounce that off of, and it sounds really good, because otherwise you just have someone, just standing there looking at you.
Listen. One time we had when Ellie McKendall and I were co-hosts together, she loved Barry White. So there was a guy who worked with us, and you probably remember Mike Julius. Mike had a great voice.
He did The Quiet Storm. I remember him. Yeah,
right. And he could bring his level, his vocal level down to like the Barry White level, right? So, I think it was Emily's birthday, and I said,
I hear it coming.
Yeah, I said, dude, we're gonna hook this up, and we're gonna try to pull it off. So we did. I said, Emily, it's your birthday. I know you know your thing about Barry White, but I made a few phone calls. I got in touch, and we got him on the line. And she was almost going for it. Because she said you almost had me, and like, right, you were right there. And then I kind of caught it, and I said, nah. But it was a good effort. It was so much fun to do, though. I mean, that was really a lot of fun to do, you know. So we had a lot.
Wow.
We had a lot of fun. We really did. Let me just put this in before we if we wrap up anytime soon. I just want to put this out there.
Sure.
My granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, uh, she graduated from Spelman a couple of years ago, degree in economics. But her thing has become film. She really wants to do film, and she's been working in that area for the last 2 or 3 years, trying to learn all that she can about film. She took it as a minor, so she decided. I guess one of her instructors said, "Do you know anybody in film?" And she said, "No, but my grandfather was in radio for a long time." So he said, "Oh, that'd be a good documentary." So right now, my granddaughter is working on a documentary about my years in radio.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so we'll see what happens with that. They've done some filming already, and I'm not sure how long it will take to do that because documentaries, you got to get funding, which she's gotten some, but it takes more and takes longer to do the things you've got to do. So, just thought I would let you know that that's part of what's going on.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you can, or if you can obtain that information, there may be somebody that may want to contribute. You know, I can put that information out.
Yeah, I'll send you a thing. I'll send you a piece on that she
Yeah.
put together. You know.
Yeah. Because one of the things that I remember so well is back in the, well, I'll just go give my time. Between the 80s and the late 90s, there was a such thing as a fandom. And this is before we even had social media. Like Rick Party was even mentioning that social media was not existent, and the also the internet was not that popular, but
Right.
radio was definitely popular. You know, so I just think that there's a such thing as fandom then, but not so much now because there's so many different options. I mean, for radio or for music, for that matter.
Yeah, I remember fandom. Yeah, yeah.
You know, we used to go, and I remember one remote that you and I went to, and Sasha was there as well. And it was, I believe it was at a record shop, and it was
Okay.
for Spirit Express, and there were people all in the place.
Right, right.
And I'm like, who's going to work? Or maybe this was a stop before they go to work. I don't know. But I've been able to experience what real fandom is. And this is, of course, before syndication. So, yeah.
Good days. There were some good days, no question.
And when I say, and so the reason I'm saying that, there could be someone that's a big fan of Richard Steele that would love to see that documentary and would love to make a contribution toward what your granddaughter is doing.
Well, I'm
You
going to
know.
send you the information.
That's awesome. That's
Okay.
awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. Well, Richard, I thank you for your time. You definitely need your flowers now.
Yeah, they better hurry up.
Yeah, and I really appreciated working with you, man. It's definitely been a treat. You're definitely a bona fide professional, and even when I wasn't so much of a professional, but guess what? I know that's what actually pays my bills now. And when I teach other students, it's about professional. You can have all the technical skills in the world, but if you don't show up on time, that don't matter at all.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct about that. So, but you are a professional, no, in the true sense of the word, and it has been a pleasure of mine to have worked with you over the years too. And the fact that you're still around doing what you do is a tribute to your ability and talent.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, you've just listened to another segment of Chicago Radio Legends. I have Richard Steele, veteran, iconic radio. I said veteran already, radio personality and broadcaster. Thank you, Richard. You have a great evening.